Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been working double shifts at the hospital for the past 3 weeks. My supervisor had been out sick, and I've been covering her shifts on top of my own because we were already short-staffed. By the time Friday rolled around, I was barely functioning. My feet ached, my back felt like it was about to snap in half, and all I wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and sleep for about 12 hours straight. The train was my only option since my car had broken down the previous Monday. The mechanic said it would take at least another week to get the parts he needed. So there I was, standing on the platform at 6 in the evening, waiting for the train that would take me the 45 minutes back to my apartment. When the train arrived, I was relieved to see it wasn't completely packed. I spotted a window seat about halfway down the car and made a beeline for it. The window seat was important to me because I get motion sickness when I face backward or sit in the middle seats. I'd learned that the hard way during my first week of taking the train. Sitting by the window and watching the scenery helped keep the nausea at bay. I dropped into the seat with a sigh of relief, letting my bag fall to the floor between my feet. The cool glass felt good against my temple when I leaned my head against the window. I just closed my eyes when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I opened my eyes to see a woman standing in the aisle. She had her hands on her hips, and a kid who looked about 7 or 8 standing next to her clutching some kind of handheld gaming device. The woman told me that her son wanted the window seat and that I'd had my turn. I blinked at her, trying to process what she'd just said. Had my turn? What did that even mean? I apologized but told her I was sitting here. I pointed out that there were other window seats available, gesturing toward the back of the train car where I could see at least 2 empty window seats. She insisted those were too far back and that her son wanted this specific one. She told me to be reasonable, saying I was an adult and he was just a child. I explained that I understood, but I needed the window seat because I get motion sickness. She scoffed at this and said I just didn't want to move because I was selfish. She asked what difference it made to me since it was just a seat. I repeated that it made a difference because I would get sick if I didn't sit by the window. And I wasn't moving. Her face turned red, and her voice got louder. She said it was unbelievable that I would really make a child stand just because I wanted to look out the window. I reminded her there were other seats, and that her son didn't have to stand. The kid was looking increasingly uncomfortable with the whole situation. He tugged on his mother's sleeve and told her it was okay, that he could sit somewhere else. She snapped at him that it wasn't okay. She said it was ridiculous that they should have to move because I was being selfish and wouldn't give up a seat for a child. Other passengers were starting to stare. I felt my face getting hot, but I was too exhausted to deal with this properly. I just wanted her to leave me alone. I told her I wasn't moving and asked her to please find another seat. She said we'd see about that. She turned and walked toward the front of the train car. I watched her stop the conductor who was checking tickets. She pointed at me and started talking, her hands waving around. The conductor, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a tired expression, listened to her for a moment before walking over to me with her trailing behind him. The conductor asked if there was a problem. I told him no, that I was just sitting in my seat. Karen jumped in and said I wouldn't move for her son. She claimed he wanted the window seat and I was being completely unreasonable about it. The conductor looked from her to me, then back to her. He explained that the seats on this train weren't assigned and that I was here first. He told her she was welcome to find one of the empty window seats, and if she didn't want to move, that was her choice. But he made it clear he couldn't make someone give up their seat just because she wanted it. She protested, asking if adults shouldn't give up seats for children. He clarified that courtesy seating was for elderly or disabled passengers, and even then, it was a courtesy and not a requirement. He pointed out there were plenty of other seats available, gesturing toward the empty seats I'd mentioned earlier. He said he needed to finish checking tickets and asked her to please find a seat so they could depart on time. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Her face had gone from red to almost purple. She declared it was outrageous and that the customer service on this train was terrible. She threatened to file a complaint. The conductor told her she was welcome to do that and mentioned there was a website on her ticket. Then he asked her again to please sit down. He walked away, continuing down the aisle to check other passengers' tickets. Karen stood there for another moment, glaring at me. She said loud enough for everyone to hear that people these days had no manners and no respect, and that it was disgusting. She grabbed her son's hand and pulled him toward the back of the train, continuing to say how rude and selfish people were. Her son looked back at me with an apologetic expression before they disappeared down the aisle. I leaned my head back against the window and closed my eyes again. My hands were shaking slightly from the confrontation. The kid seemed perfectly happy playing his game. Karen, on the other hand, spent the entire ride shooting angry looks in my direction. I didn't care. I had my window seat, my motion sickness was under control, and in 45 minutes, I'd be home. Her entitlement wasn't my problem to solve. My mother-in-law is a sweet woman, really, but my sister-in-law has always had this need to control everything when we get together. She's got 3 kids of her own, all under 7, and she's one of those parents who believes in strict routines and rules. That's fine for her family, but she's always trying to extend those rules to my kids too. My daughter just turned 9 last month, and my son is 4. They're good eaters, always have been. We don't do the typical kids menu stuff at home because they genuinely enjoy regular food. My daughter will demolish a full burger or a plate of pasta without breaking a sweat, and my son, despite being only 4, eats more than some adults I know. It's just how they are. When my mother-in-law's birthday came around, we all agreed to meet at this nice Italian restaurant she loves. There were going to be 10 of us total. Me, my husband, our 2 kids, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, her husband, and their 3 kids. We got there right on time, and everyone was already seated when we arrived. The restaurant was busy but not packed, and we had a long table set up for our group. My kids immediately ran to hug their grandmother, who was sitting at the head of the table looking happy. After about 15 minutes of everyone catching up, the waiter came over to take our orders. He started at one end of the table with my father-in-law. That's when my sister-in-law suddenly stood up a little and raised her voice so everyone could hear. She announced loudly that all the kids at the table would be having the chicken tenders from the kids' menu with fries and apple juice. The waiter nodded and started writing it down. My daughter looked at me with this confused expression because she'd been looking at the menu and had already decided she wanted the fettuccine alfredo. I was sitting there processing what just happened. My sister-in-law hadn't asked me. She hadn't even looked at me. She just announced what my kids would be eating like she was paying for their meals. The waiter continued down the table taking orders from the adults. My sister-in-law ordered for all 3 of her kids without asking them. Then her husband ordered. Then my mother-in-law and father-in-law ordered. My husband ordered next, and then the waiter got to me. The waiter asked what I would like. I told him I would have the chicken marsala, and then I added that my kids would be ordering from the regular menu, not the kids' menu. I saw my sister-in-law's head snap in my direction, but I ignored her. The waiter seemed a bit surprised but asked what they would like. My daughter spoke up immediately and asked if she could have the fettuccine alfredo. The waiter said of course, then asked what my son wanted. My son enthusiastically said he wanted spaghetti and meatballs. The waiter asked what they wanted to drink. My daughter said lemonade, and my son practically shouted that he wanted chocolate milk. The waiter smiled and wrote it all down, then headed to the kitchen. The moment he was gone, I could feel the tension radiating from my sister-in-law's side of the table. I tried to focus on the conversation my mother-in-law was having with my father-in-law, but then I heard my sister-in-law's middle kid asking her why my kids got big food. My sister-in-law responded in a voice loud enough for me to hear that it was because their mom thought they were special. My husband's hand found mine under the table and squeezed it. I took a breath. The meal was awkward. My sister-in-law barely looked at me, and when the food came, her kids kept staring at my daughter's pasta. And to be fair, it looked amazing, and my daughter was happily twirling her fork in it. My son was covered in marinara sauce but grinning ear to ear with a meatball stabbed on his fork. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law's kids picked at their chicken tenders. They looked sad. After we finished eating and sang happy birthday to my mother-in-law, people started getting up to leave. That's when my sister-in-law cornered me near the bathroom. She told me that what I did was really embarrassing. I asked her what she meant. She explained that I had undermined her in front of everyone. She said she had told the kids they were all getting the same thing, and then my kids got special meals. Now her kids were asking questions and whining. I told her I didn't undermine her. I pointed out that she made a decision for her kids, and I made a decision for my kids. I reminded her that I was the one paying for their meals. She said that I made her look bad. I asked how I did that by feeding my children food they would eat enough of. I explained that my kids don't eat kids' meals anymore and that 2 chicken tenders wouldn't fill them up. She said I could have just gone along with it for once. She argued that it was about keeping things simple and fair for all the kids. I questioned what was fair about her deciding what my kids eat without even asking me first. She opened her mouth to respond, but my husband appeared behind me and asked if everything was okay. My sister-in-law looked at both of us, then turned and walked away without another word. On the drive home, my husband told me his sister had texted him. She said I embarrassed her and made her look like a bad mom in front of everyone. She also said her kids cried in the car because they wanted pasta like my daughter had. My husband mentioned that she wanted me to apologize. I asked him what I was supposed to apologize for feeding our kids. He told me he had already responded to her and said her expectation was ridiculous. He said he told her she couldn't expect to control what other people's kids eat just because she wanted everything uniform. I asked what her response was. He said she told him we were teaching our kids to be entitled. I laughed. The irony was just too much. My mother-in-law called me the next day. I expected her to tell me I caused drama at her birthday lunch, but instead she surprised me. She said my sister-in-law had called her the night before very upset. I apologized if I ruined her birthday. She immediately told me I didn't ruin anything. She said she wanted me to know that she thought I did the right thing. She explained that I know my children and what they need, and that my sister-in-law had no business trying to order for them. She even said she told my sister-in-law the same thing. That made me feel better. My sister-in-law didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that, but eventually things went back to normal. Well, mostly normal. She never tried to order for my kids again. Our daughter just turned 8 and we've been planning this birthday party for weeks. She'd been so excited, talking about it non-stop, making lists of games to play and what kind of cake she wanted. The thing is, our neighbor has a son who's the same age as our daughter. I'm gonna be straight with you, this kid has serious behavioral problems. I'm not saying that to be mean, it's just a fact. He's been suspended from school twice this year alone for fighting. He pushed our daughter off the swing set at the park last month and didn't even apologize. His mom always makes excuses for him, says he's just spirited or that other kids provoke him. When we were planning the guest list, our daughter specifically said she didn't want him there. She was actually scared of him. What were we supposed to do? Force our kid to invite someone who makes her uncomfortable to her own birthday party? So we didn't invite him. We invited her actual friends from school and a couple kids from her soccer team. The party was set for Saturday afternoon in our backyard. We'd rented tables, bought decorations, ordered a custom cake with her favorite cartoon character on it. My wife spent the whole morning setting everything up while I went to pick up the cake and party supplies. By noon, everything looked perfect. The kids started arriving around 1 o'clock. There were about 12 of them total, all running around, playing games, having a great time. Our daughter was beaming. We'd set up a little obstacle course, had a piñata ready to go, and the cake was sitting on the main table waiting for the big moment. Around 2 o'clock, I noticed our neighbor watching from her kitchen window. She had this look on her face that made me uneasy, but I tried to ignore it. Then she came outside and stood at the fence that separates our yards. She made some comment about us having quite the party. I told her it was our daughter's birthday. She said it was funny that they didn't get an invitation. I explained it was just a small thing with her close friends. She shot back that her son was the same age and in the same class as our daughter. My wife came over and stood next to me. She said that our daughter wanted to keep it small, with just her closest friends. Our neighbor wasn't buying it. She accused us of saying her son wasn't good enough to be invited. My wife tried to explain that wasn't what we were saying at all, that our daughter had picked who she wanted to invite. Our neighbor got more aggressive, claiming this was discrimination and that we were excluding him because we thought we were better than them. I'd had enough. I told her we weren't doing this right now, that it was our daughter's party and she invited who she wanted to invite. Our neighbor walked back into her house and I figured that was it. I should have known better. We got the kids together for cake about 20 minutes later. They were all gathered around the table singing happy birthday. Our daughter was about to blow out the candles when I heard her back door slam open. Before I could even turn around, I felt it. A blast of freezing cold water hit me right in the back with so much force, it actually knocked me forward. The kids started screaming. I spun around and saw our neighbor standing at the fence with a high-pressure hose, the kind you use to clean driveways, spraying it directly at us. She yelled something about how, if her son couldn't enjoy the party, nobody could. The water was hitting everything. Kids were crying and running. The cake was completely destroyed, frosting and decorations sliding off onto the ground. The tables were knocked over. Our daughter was sobbing, her party dress soaked through. My wife screamed at her to stop and asked what was wrong with her. She didn't stop. She kept spraying, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. I tried to shield the kids and get them inside the house. Parents started showing up because the kids were calling them in a panic. It was absolute chaos. I shouted that I was calling the police. She yelled back to go ahead, that we deserved this. She finally stopped and went back inside her house. I was shaking with anger. My wife was trying to comfort our daughter who couldn't stop crying. Her special day was ruined. The cake we'd spent good money on was destroyed. All the decorations were wrecked. Some of the kids' phones had gotten wet. I called the cops and explained what happened. When the officers arrived about 10 minutes later, I wasn't sure how much they'd be able to do. My wife and I told them everything, but I figured it would be a he said, she said situation. Then one of the kids, a little girl from our daughter's class, spoke up. She told the officers they got it on video. It turned out several of the kids had been recording the party on their phones. When our neighbor started her rampage, they caught the whole thing on camera. Multiple angles, clear footage of her spraying us with the hose, yelling that if her son couldn't enjoy the party, nobody could. The officers watched the videos and their expressions changed immediately. One of them said they needed to go talk to our neighbor. They knocked on her door. When she answered, they asked her about the incident. She tried to deny it at first, said we were making it up, that we'd probably just turned the sprinklers on by accident. The officer told her they had video evidence from multiple sources showing her assaulting us with a pressure washer. Her whole demeanor changed. She started making excuses, saying we'd provoked her by excluding her son, that we were the real problem. The officers weren't having it. One of them told her to turn around and put her hands behind her back. She couldn't believe they were serious. The officer said clearly that she was being arrested for assault and destruction of property. They handcuffed her right there in front of everyone. She was screaming about how unfair it was, how we'd started it, how her son was the real victim. The officers led her to their car while she continued ranting. The party was obviously over. Parents picked up their kids. We spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning up the mess and trying to console our daughter. We had a do-over party for our daughter the next weekend. This time we made sure to rent out a space at an indoor play center, just to be safe. I've been taking my son to outpatient speech therapy every Wednesday for years now. He's 13 and nonverbal autistic. The facility is part of our local hospital, and over time I've seen all kinds of parents and kids come through. We've been doing this since he was 5, so that's 8 years of weekly appointments. The waiting room has become familiar territory. I know which chairs have the least wobble, which magazines get replaced monthly, and which vending machine actually works. I've watched other families come and go, some for a few months, others for years like us. You see a lot in that waiting room. Kids with different challenges, parents at different stages of acceptance and exhaustion. Some days the room is quiet, other days it's chaos. I've learned not to judge because everyone's dealing with their own stuff. A few weeks ago, there was a woman in the waiting area with 2 children. She had a toddler girl and a boy who looked about 7 years old. I'm guessing she was waiting for another child who was in therapy. I'd never seen them before, so I figured they were new. From the moment I sat down, something felt off about how she was treating the boy. He couldn't do anything without her getting upset. He'd shift in his seat and she'd snap at him. He'd try to talk to her, and she'd cut him off with a sharp tone that made everyone uncomfortable. The toddler dropped her sippy cup and the woman picked it up with a smile and wiped it off. The boy accidentally knocked his backpack off the chair next to him and she shot him a look that made him flinch. He quickly picked it up and put it back, then sat perfectly still. At one point, he wasn't even misbehaving, just sitting there quietly, and she still found something to criticize. She told him to stop fidgeting and asked if he could just sit still for 5 minutes. He tried to explain that he wasn't even moving that much. She cut him off and told him not to talk back. She said she didn't want to hear it. He went quiet after that, just stared at his shoes. The little girl babbled something and the woman laughed and responded in this sweet voice. Then she turned back to the boy and her whole face changed. She told him to sit up straight and stop slouching. He adjusted his posture immediately. The other parents in the room were pretending not to notice, but I could tell they were uncomfortable too. One woman got up and moved to a chair further away. Another dad kept looking at his phone like he was trying to focus on anything else. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what. It wasn't my place, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. The little girl was getting all the gentle treatment, while this boy was getting torn apart for basically existing. I watched her dismiss everything he said, talk to him like he was an inconvenience. At one point, he asked if he could go to the bathroom. She sighed like he'd just asked her to climb a mountain. She told him to wait until his sibling was done with therapy. He said okay and went back to staring at his shoes. It was hard to watch. I get it. Parenting is exhausting. We all have moments where we're at the end of our rope. I've had days where I've felt touched out, overstimulated, and running on 3 hours of sleep. But this wasn't a moment. This was just how she talked to him. Consistently, for the entire time they were there. They sat there for at least 30 minutes before their appointment, and it was like this the whole time. The thing is, I was talked to like that when I was a kid. My parents had that same tone, that same impatience, that same way of making me feel like I was always doing something wrong. Nothing I did was ever good enough. I could get straight A's and they'd ask why I didn't get extra credit. I could clean my room and they'd find something I missed. I could sit quietly and they'd tell me to stop looking so miserable. It didn't matter what I did. I was always the problem. I'm 34 now and I still deal with the fallout from that. Anxiety, self-doubt, this constant feeling that I'm annoying people just by being around them. I apologize for things that aren't my fault. I read into every tone, every facial expression, waiting for someone to be upset with me. It messes you up in ways that last your whole life. I've been in therapy for 6 years trying to undo what my childhood did to me. So watching her treat her son that way hit different for me. I felt embarrassed for her. Everyone in that waiting room could see it. But more than that, I felt terrible for that kid. I could see myself in him. That same look of trying so hard to be invisible, to not take up space, to not be a burden. My son can be a handful. He's perfect to me, but he has behaviors that are challenging. He pinches, slaps, scratches when he's overwhelmed or frustrated. Sometimes he tries to bolt, and I have to be on high alert every second. He's broken my glasses twice, given me bruises that lasted weeks, and once bit me so hard I needed a tetanus shot. It's just part of our reality. I've learned to stay calm through it, because getting upset doesn't help him, and it doesn't help me. It took years to get to this point. In the beginning, I'd get frustrated and overwhelmed, and I'd raise my voice. But I learned that he wasn't doing these things to hurt me or make my life harder. He was communicating the only way he knew how. So I changed my approach. I learned his triggers, his calming techniques, his patterns. I learned that patience wasn't just the best option, it was the only option that actually worked. His therapy session was wrapping up and I could hear him before I could see him. He was having a moment, making loud vocalizations, clearly overstimulated from the session. I stood up and got ready because I knew he'd need help transitioning. When he came out into the hallway, that family was still there waiting. The woman looked up when she heard the noise. I saw her face change, saw her grab her daughter a little closer. The boy just watched with wide eyes. My son came straight up to me, which is normal, but he was really worked up. His hands were flapping rapidly and he was making this high-pitched sound that means he's at his limit. Before I could redirect him, he scratched me hard down the entire length of my forearm. I could feel it burning. The skin opened up in thin red lines. Then he slapped the same arm, hard enough that the sound echoed in the hallway. In the past, this would have made me tense up, maybe even embarrassed depending on who was around. But I've learned that how I react sets the tone for everything. If I get upset, he gets more upset, and everything spirals. So I took a breath, and even though my arm was stinging and I could see the red marks already forming, I kept my voice calm and steady. I made direct eye contact with that other mother and told my son to try to calm down and have nice hands. I called him bro, like I always do. My voice was gentle, no anger or frustration in it at all. I wanted her to see this. I wanted her to see that even when my kid is literally hurting me, I can still speak to him with respect and patience. I wanted her to understand that if I can stay calm when I'm being scratched and slapped, she can stay calm when her kid is just being a regular 7-year-old boy. Her son wasn't hurting anyone. He wasn't yelling or throwing things or being violent. He was just being a kid, and she was treating him like he was ruining her life. She broke eye contact right away. Just looked down at the floor. Her face went red. She knew exactly what I was doing and why. I gently guided my son's hands away and started our calming routine. I took his hands and helped him clap them together slowly, which helps him regulate. He was still agitated but starting to come down. His breathing was slowing, the vocalizations getting quieter. The whole time I could feel her watching us out of the corner of her eye. Her daughter said something to her, and she barely responded. The boy was still watching us too, but his expression had changed. He looked curious now instead of scared. After a minute, my son had calmed down enough that we could start walking to the exit. I grabbed our bag with one hand and kept the other on his shoulder to keep him grounded. I noticed the scratches on my arm were bleeding a little bit. It stung, but I'd had worse. When we walked past that family, I heard the woman say something to her son in a softer voice than before. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was different. Part of me felt bad for using my son like that. He didn't ask to be part of some lesson I was trying to teach a stranger. He was just having a hard moment, and I turned it into a teaching opportunity for someone else. But another part of me hopes it made her think. I hope she went home that night and looked at her son differently. So this story takes me way back to the early 90s. I was working at one of those big membership warehouse stores. You know the type. The kind where you buy everything in bulk and need a card just to get in the door. I've been there for about 2 years at that point, working in the stock room and sometimes helping out on the floor. It was decent work, decent pay, and honestly, I didn't mind it most days. The break room still had ashtrays back then, if you can believe it. Different times. Anyway, I should mention that our warehouse had always been pretty relaxed about appearance. Sure, we had to wear the uniform polo shirts and name tags, but beyond that, management didn't really care what we looked like when we showed up and did our jobs. A bunch of us guys had longer hair. Nothing crazy professional, but we weren't exactly corporate types either. My buddy from receiving had hair down to his butt, legitimately. He'd been growing it since high school and was super proud of it. A few other guys had shoulder length or longer hair too. It had never been a problem before. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed. Our warehouse manager called a staff meeting before the store opened. He stood there looking all serious and told everyone to listen up. He announced that we were going to start enforcing the dress code more strictly. He said that, effective immediately, men's hair couldn't touch the collar of our shirts, and if it did, we needed to cut it. My buddy immediately spoke up, asking what the manager meant. He pointed out that this hadn't been an issue for the 3 years he'd worked there. The manager just said it was an issue now and called it company policy. He gave us 2 weeks to comply. My buddy said it was insane and that he'd been growing his hair for almost a decade. The manager suggested he find a barber and repeated the 2-week deadline before ending the meeting. We all just stood there afterward, pretty shocked. There were at least 5 or 6 of us who were going to be affected by this. My own hair was just starting to touch my collar, so I was borderline, but my buddy and the others were looking at losing years of growth. None of us understood where this was suddenly coming from. My buddy said he wasn't cutting it and called the whole thing garbage. I asked him what he was going to do since the manager had said it was policy. He said he'd figure something out. For the next week and a half, there was a lot of tension. Management kept reminding us about the deadline. A couple guys reluctantly went and got haircuts, looking miserable about it. But my buddy and two others were holding out. I figured they'd either give in at the last minute or end up fired, which seemed like a stupid reason to lose a job. Then, on day 13, my buddy showed up to work with short hair. Like normal short hair that clearly met the dress code, I was honestly disappointed. I thought he'd caved. I told him I couldn't believe he actually cut it. He asked who said he cut it. I was confused and pointed out that his hair was clearly short now. He looked around to make sure no managers were nearby. Then he grabbed his hair and lifted it slightly. He told me it was a wig and that he was dead serious. He said it cost him $150, but it looked just like his real hair would if he cut it. He explained that underneath his real hair was tied back in a bun. I was stunned. It looked completely real. Within a few days, he told some of the other guys about his solution, and suddenly 3 more employees showed up wearing wigs. Management didn't seem to notice or care. They just saw short hair and were satisfied. But here's where it got beautiful. After about a month of wearing realistic wigs, the guys started to have some fun with it. My buddy showed up one day with a completely different wig, still short but jet black instead of his natural brown. A customer noticed and asked him if he didn't have brown hair yesterday. My buddy confirmed that he did, but said that since management made them cut their hair, he figured he'd try something new. The customer asked if management really made him cut it. My buddy confirmed it was a new policy and explained that their natural hair couldn't touch their collars. So there they were. The customer looked confused and walked away. But word started spreading. Another guy who was ginger with freckles showed up with a black wig. Then this African-American co-worker of ours who'd also had long hair came in wearing a bright red wig. It was absolutely ridiculous looking, but it technically met the dress code requirements. Customers started commenting constantly. The wigs were becoming more and more outrageous. One guy wore a blonde wig one day and a brown one the next. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. And whenever a customer asked about it, they'd explain very matter-of-factly that management had a policy about hair length, so they had to wear wigs. Eventually, the manager confronted my buddy and asked why he was wearing these ridiculous wigs. My buddy explained that the manager had said our hair couldn't touch our collars, and these wigs didn't touch our collars, so we were following policy. The manager said this wasn't what they meant. My buddy pointed out that the manager hadn't specified and that the policy just said hair length, so these were technically our hair now. The manager's face turned red, but he couldn't really argue. They'd created this rule, and we were technically following it. Meanwhile, customers were starting to complain to corporate. Not about us, but about the weird policy that was making employees wear obvious wigs. It was becoming a whole thing. This went on for almost 4 months. The break room conversations were hilarious, with guys planning which ridiculous wig to wear next. One guy even wore a different wig every single day for a week. Management was getting increasingly frustrated, but they'd backed themselves into a corner. Finally, we got called into another meeting. The manager announced that, effective immediately, the hair length policy was being revised. He explained that when our natural hair was clean, presentable, and didn't interfere with our work duties, length would no longer be restricted. The room erupted in cheers. The next day, all the wigs disappeared, and everyone came back with their natural long hair. Management never brought it up again. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.